I'm adding myself. And there we go. And I think we're live now.
Cool.
Yeah, we're live. Let me here. I'm going to leave that one. There we go. So welcome everyone to Zach live stream.
Yay.
ZLS number 18. It's so crazy we're at 18 already, but this is definitely the episode I'm most excited about because we've got Nicole on stream. Nicole, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'll just let everyone know we know each other from work. We're both Nrwl employees. We actually, I think I messaged you about like a YouTube video. You did
yeah.
Like that was the start of our friendship.
yeah, that was like super coincidental. Like the first talk that I gave at NG Atlanta. Sorry, I'm hearing some noise. Can you hear
no,
any noise? Okay.
You sounded good.
Okay. At NG Atlanta, I did a talk last year about decorators, and then it just by like a technical fluke, there was like the demo didn't get recorded, and so I recorded like another demo of like what I had presented, and you had messaged me about it. I think you were the only you were the one who like stood out to me, like. And then you got hired at Nrwl like right after, and I was like, I'm like totally planning to apply at Nrwl. It was like really coincidental and funny.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think Nrwl hired me back in November originally, but I was finishing up a project, so I kind of knew I was coming on to Nrwl, so I was just stalking Nrwl super hard, and I was like, I know they're at NG Atlanta. I'm gonna watch all these talks.
I know.
So it's kind of where it came from.
Yeah, and that was like really, it was such a eventful conference for me. That first NG Atlanta. It was the second NG Atlanta, but my first. I met Jeff and Victor there, and got to know like some of the other.
We got Jeff in the comments.
Nice. And Jeff was very convincing. And I got to be in his like wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
He had that
video.
Little clip, right?
Which was really fun. And I think I also met Katarina there, who's now a part of Nrwl, and some other people. Man, it feels so long ago now. But yeah, I'm glad we're all together now. Like we're all working at Nrwl and like having a good time. It's fun.
The gang's all here.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
Yeah, so I've been working at Nrwl for about a year and a half now, I think. And I kind of specialize in like design systems and styles and styling applications, and Angular, of course. So that's kind of where I've spent most of my career, like developing my expertise. And I'm really excited to talk to you today. And I don't know, like I kind of want to hear a little bit more about like the application that you're working on, because I've dropped in from time to time on the stream just to see all the work that you're doing. So let's dive into it.
So the stream I've been working on so far, I've been purposely avoiding styles. So I'm in a typical Zach's fashion. Nicole knows. I just I have a tendency to just like get things working and like let things go from there. I think we've actually had this conversation before, right? Where I think I actually see like I see like a divide, I think, between like a data engineer and like a styling engineer. Styling's not the right word. Maybe like a theming or a user experience engineer. Something like that.
I could see that, and I think there's a lot of like people who do like kind of fall into those categories, but I don't think you necessarily have to. I definitely like look at our skill sets and think like like, I think we make like a good pair, like when we're working together, because like you have a very like reactive and like, I don't know, just like when I look at your code, like it's pretty clear that like your brain is like wired in this particular way that my brain is not wired in it. And I mean that in a good way.
I appreciate that.
We have like we have these like skill sets that I think like kind of complement each other. Because like when I look at like the things that you can like do with reactive programming and RxJS and all that, I don't know if I would like necessarily like categorize that as like data oriented versus like styles or like UX oriented. But it's definitely like a hugely valuable skill. But like when I was starting out in my career, like I was really interested in databases. I thought it was like really fun to just like work with relational databases because like developing queries and like understanding like how to lay out data was like it kind of felt like this big puzzle to me. So I really enjoyed that aspect. But yeah, like I guess you spend different like parts of your career kind of like focusing on different things and like kind of, I don't know, I've kind of like drifted away a little bit from that interest.
So it's interesting you bring that up. I definitely went through a point in my career, especially at the beginning. So I kind of took a weird path. You know this, Nicole, but like I started out like I was getting a theology degree, and then what ended up going back to school for computer science. Yeah. And I remember when I first got started in computer science, everything I learned, I tried to turn it into an RPG game. Like that was my way of learning stuff. I would like make a Pokemon clone. That's how I learned Java. That's how I learned relational databases. That's how I learned all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say that. But yeah. So how did you go from databases to being like a style expert at Nrwl now?
Well, I definitely have like always had an interest in like styles and like UX and like I wanted to, when I was in early college, I wanted to be an illustrator. I spent a lot of my time like drawing and painting. That's what my major was. And I got a position like working on like print design and that kind of thing. And so I had already been spending a lot of time with like the various Adobe products, Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign. And then the shop that I was working at the university had like an opening as a programmer. So I kind of like started going from like web design to over to just like programming with Node.js and Angular.
Nice.
So yeah, that was kind of my transition. But like my office mate at the time, Katie, and she's like one of my best friends. She has a strong interest in user experience, and I went to a lot of like meetups for user experience when I was working with her, and she just like really got me interested in like UX, seeing things from like a user-centered design perspective, and I think like I was talking to my husband the other day about this because. He's seen me throughout like the entire transition of like going from like a more design and UX perspective to more of a like programming perspective. And and like we're working on NX Cloud now at Nrwl. It's like a new product that we're working on. And
the best product.
Yes, highly recommended.
Yeah, I hooked it up to I hooked our project up on stream to NX Cloud.
Yeah.
I was very excited to do that. But
so you know, like as we're developing, like we often have these like UX questions that like come up, and it's so interesting to me. Like the feeling of like looking at something and trying to see it from like a UX perspective and like what is the best flow like as a user, like as you're walking through this process. Whereas I think that like the more involved in like programming and the more you understand about like the underlying entities and like how everything is structured on the back end or like underneath, like you sort of lose sight of it in some ways.
Yeah.
Like you start to see things as like entities, and like how do I best like lay out these entities to represent like the true like hierarchy of like how things are. Like how can I get the user to understand like the hierarchy here? Whereas like that the user doesn't need to understand like the way that like all these entities fit together, except for like in any way that benefits them. So like sometimes the user interface can end up completely different than like the whatever underlies it, which is just like such a brain trip for me. Like I don't know, when you kind of switch between those sides of your brain, like, or like it's not even sides of your brain, it's just like modes of thinking.
Well, things get muddled, right? The more stuff you introduce in. Like I think every project I've done by myself, it's always like, the back end's going to look like this, and the front end's going to look like this, and they're all going to match up perfectly, and that lasts for maybe a few days, and then it's just like you're back to where you started. So.
Yeah, and even if you like plan everything out, like once you start building, you're like, "Ooh, didn't think about that part." Like,
Well, the biggest thing you said that I caught on from what you were saying was just like that empathy. The empathy of looking at a screen and seeing it as your user coming into it the first time. Like that's such a huge skill. I feel like, that's a skill I try to work at every time I write code. Like thinking of it as, is this something? Would this make sense to someone else?
Yeah, and not just from like the user's perspective. Oh, thanks, Jeff.
There's going to be a highlighted Jeff quotes all.
Not just from your user or like a user perspective, right? Like it's also like from a developer perspective, and like
I think code is so much more for humans than for machines. I think if we wrote it for machines, it would look completely different. And I think especially if we get to the point like, was that the GP3 stuff? I haven't looked at like the code that's spitting out, but if we actually get to a point, what's that?
The GP3 stuff?
Yeah, is that right? It's like the AI where there was this thing on Twitter I saw. You just like type into an input field. Like, show me a table of countries by population, and it'll generate like a working app with like a table and filtering and sorting and all that just from typing that in.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. I saw other places where people had the same engine like write a tech article, and it was like scarily indecipherable.
Insightful?
Like it definitely, not insightful, indecipherable. I'm sorry. Like I couldn't tell. It passed the Turing test for me, like very well. Like so the Turing test is like whether you can tell is something a human or is it a machine, and it's like, I don't know, it's this bar to clear. At some point you can't tell anymore, and
but
the world goes.
You said it was indecipherable, or it was decipherable.
It was indecipherable. I couldn't tell. I wouldn't, if I hadn't known that it was AI writing it, I wouldn't have been able to tell.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. From the blog post I read. So the blog post that it generated. So I don't know. That's a whole thing that's kind of on the outskirts of my radar. I'm not an AI person by any means. Linear algebra scares me. I think if we ever get to a point where machines are writing code for machines, and like that's all it is.
I'm sure we will. It's just a matter of time.
We will too. I think we will too eventually. But I think the code that they'll write, it will look much different than ours. Like if humans are completely out of that loop, like to the point where humans aren't even debugging it, it's going to look a lot different. Like our brains only have. I think I said this at the Seattle JS meetup. Our brains only have so much RAM. Like we can't juggle that much stuff at a time.
And but there's like kind of ways to hack it, right? Like people who remember like so many numbers of pi, like thousands of numbers of pi. There's like ways to hack it, but you have to really practice and like know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it's a lot easier to. Well, I don't know. The way I approach things, given that knowledge, is like just make stuff simpler. Like if you can't juggle that many things in your head, it just gets to make it so you only have to juggle the one.
Yeah.
And then try to go from there. And I think you end up writing better code that way. You end up not having to think so much about, well, what's going on. Don't forget about this ball over here that I'm juggling.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, like the other thing that's really interesting is that like when you see like a PR that I wrote, or like anybody wrote, like, you know, I send you a PR and like you look at it and you're like, what the heck was Nicole thinking? Like, this is like just so many different disparate parts that are like, you know, like, I don't know what the thought process was. Like what you're seeing is this like bundle that like, you're like kind of consuming it all at once, right? But like when I was working on that thing, I was spending like, you know, I spent 2 days on it. I had like each of these pieces. It was like, it's more of a process. And I understand like that process, but you see it like from a totally different perspective. Like that's always kind of like interesting. Yeah. I try and think about that like when I review PRs, because like sometimes you'll like see pieces that are like, it doesn't seem to fit together. But then when you ask the person, you're like, oh, I understand why you did that now.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I've got for a long time. So for the first several years of my career, like I never did a PR process. I never did like a code review or anything like that.
What did you do?
It was very weird. Sorry, what was that?
What did you do?
So I was at a smaller shop, and we just kind of had for most of my projects, I was the sole engineer. So I would just write like back-end code, the front-end code, kind of jumble it all together, and just give our clients what they want. It was like a custom solution kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't working with really any other engineers. I just kind of pushed stuff up to like the QA environment, and testers would let me know, okay, this worked. This is having a problem.
Yeah. Did you use version control?
Yes, we used like one of the older ones, SVN. Is that
SVN?
it?
Yeah. I've used SVN, yeah.
But really, like, I was just saving files on my computer. Like, I made copies of stuff is like the purest form of version control.
That's a trip, right? Like thinking back to like a time in your life when you didn't use version control.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. It's weird for me. Like I learned about it in college, but I remember merge conflicts were terrible. Like that was my only thing I remembered of Git for the longest time. And then we started modernizing our practices at my other company, and we brought in GitHub and all this stuff, and started getting better with Git, and started actually really liking Git and stuff like that. But I remember feeling so, I don't know what the right word is, exposed, like vulnerable the first time that I like put a code review up. Like I'm used to just like saying, this is good to go, ship it. And then to have someone else say, no, I don't like that you used a semicolon here. And then the first thing you see when you get a response like that is this giant red X, like from the GitHub review site. I always thought that was so weird. Like, just make it a different color. This requests comments, that should be like I don't know, a purple or something softer, something softer than a big red X. So
yeah, that can be really intimidating.
Yeah, but it can also be really, really cool. Like I think when I started doing those PRs, that's when empathy started kicking in, because I knew when I wrote this code, I would be doing it for some person who's going to be reviewing it, and which is good. Like eventually someone's going to be reviewing it. We're just closing that circle a little bit.
Yeah. So man, that's kind of crazy. Like hearing that story from you, because I had a pretty similar experience when I started writing code, because I had a lot of imposter syndrome is not the right word, but like a lack of confidence when I was starting, because I didn't have a CS degree. And I remember there was this, like, I was trying to introduce like more modern practices into like my workflow, and then the shop that I was working in also also was kind of pushing for that. And so I remember like one of the first like in-person like code reviews. Like, have you ever done like a roundtable code review where like everybody's like physically in the same room and just like kind of reviewing a code line by line?
I remember doing that at a summer internship, and I remember thinking, I'm the only one talking. Everyone else must be asleep. It was
Oh,
it was
really?
like on a Zoom call or some form of Zoom,
Yeah.
but it was kind of like that. That's my only experience with that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
we did that in the like on the team that I was working on,
yeah.
and I was the
Like
first
with
one.
everything, with
No,
every.
just we tried it like one time. Yeah, I
Okay.
actually don't know if they like continued that practice, but I think I was the only person who like subjected myself to. I mean, no, they were nice. They were nice, but like,
Present yourself before the council
yeah.
for judgment.
But I was relatively novice at the time, and I was like a almost purely. I did some Java programming, but I was more familiar with JavaScript, and so I showed them, a script that I wrote, and everybody on the team was either like an old school like Java programmer or like a fresh out of like a CS degree. Java programmer mostly, or Scala, and there were lots of comments about like Java, like basically like hating on JavaScript, like this feels weird to me because like I mean also like lots and lots of like positive feedback that was just like really good to understand, like that I needed to hear, like when I was an early programmer. But yeah, that was an experience, like a positive one, like overall, but just like very intimidating, like when I was starting out.
Yeah, for sure. I remember though once my team and I kind of got into the rhythm where we're like, I would get to the point where I would like get excited to have them review my stuff and to review theirs, and like so it was like I was learning so much more and so much faster. As a part of doing those reviews. So
yeah, and that's honestly like one of my favorite aspects of working at Nrwl is that like we work with so many like smart and emotionally intelligent is like maybe like emotionally intelligent people for sure. But like just I think what the word I want is more like well-rounded, like people who are just like aware of like the of how to like give positive feedback, constructive criticism, but all just like super super smart, and like the code reviews are so helpful. Okay, I'm gonna stop like I'm gonna stop like my advertisement for Nrwl.
No, I know.
Right? It's important.
I feel often like I'm sucking up when I talk about Nrwl because I enjoy it so much, but it's just the truth. I don't know. I definitely get what you're saying though. There's Jeff and Victor have done a really good job, I think, of hiring people that like not only just people that are smart, but people that are, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like a good human and good at good at humans. Like
lots of good humans.
Yeah, good humans that are good at human.
Can we just like change our slogan? Good humans who are good humans.
I pitched that at our last thing. I said I think I said the most important operating system is human.
Oh yeah, I remember you saying that now. Yeah.
Yeah. That was my thing for a little bit. It never caught on. So that's all right. One of these days I'll make up something that catches on.
Sure.
But yeah, before we get too far out, let's try to focus back in on styles because that's what we promised the people. So yeah, let's talk about design systems. Design systems is something I'm interested in. I had a talk with Ben, also a Nrwl guy.
You should have Ben on too.
I know. I definitely need to have Ben on.
Yeah, like he and Chelsea are just like they're running the Nrwl design system, like the effort there, and Ben has a lot of knowledge about design systems, and yeah, he would be great to have on.
Yeah, I got to get everyone from Nrwl on. Is what I need. but anyways, so we were having this discussion, and I started talking to him, and I'm realizing, wait a second, I'm thinking a design system, and what I'm thinking of is like a component library, and that's it. Like that's I didn't realize. So talking with Ben, the design system is actually the thing below it. Like it's not even code or anything. This is just like almost like a visual library of how you want things to look. A visual concordance.
It's more abstract, I think. Like I wouldn't say that. In my opinion, like design system like has a lot of different meanings. But yeah, generally like we kind of think about design systems as like a way of approaching design, like in an abstract way, and like almost like a contract between like designers and writers and programmers and like sales or like any other like stakeholders that we have for an effort. Like a design system can incorporate a lot of those rules in it, but for the most part, like I would say design like focuses on like user experience, visual elements, like how do you portray like certain ideas, and I think like generally like when people want to get into the specifics of like voice and tone for copywriting and maybe like technical details for how you like implement something in Angular or like in a component level, like those are sort of those are artifacts of a design system, and they like you said, they kind of like layer on top. They can kind of like extend the design system in some way. But yeah, like the underlying piece is like is more abstract. Yeah.
Cool. So I don't know. I've done it in the past where I've constructed what I thought was a design system. Like I said, I think it's more of a component library. But I've really enjoyed doing this in an NX workspace because you can kind of like just do a normal project, like just HTML, maybe some JavaScript or maybe some jQuery in there, and just say here's buttons and stuff and components, and here's how they should look.
Yeah.
And the piece I really like about that is you can have sort of these shared assets, like these shared CSS assets you can share between those things.
Sure.
So like you can say, okay, I'm going to work on the design system. I guess more of a component library, or I'm gonna work on this thing. This is my wireframe. So maybe that's a good word of how I want things to look. And if you construct those with actual HTML and CSS, you can just take those. Like you can just take those and move them over to like import them into your like your Angular app, which is something I've done in the past, which I kind of like because it kind of brings everything down to like the source of truth. And I don't know, I'm not very knowledgeable about styling Angular applications. I like what I'm describing. Like what I'm describing is almost like you have this global style sheet at the bottom that you just imported, you drop into the app, and then like that's it. Maybe you override some stuff in some components, and you just kind of go from there, and like you release a new version of the CSS every so often.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like prone to go with things. So maybe moving on to like styling Angular components. How would you do it, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of validity to that approach. Even in like modern application practices, like using a global style sheet, like there's nothing wrong with like having a base that is common. Like one thing that it gives you right out of the box is just consistency. And that's something that you may not be able to achieve as easily if you are just like styling individual components. It's totally possible to achieve consistency, but like the reason why CSS is like really powerful is because like it gives you that like the ability to have like that global like a global style sheet that just applies to like, you know, all these different elements. You can kind of like trust that a lot of the basic pieces of your application, maybe those that are like more text heavy, are going to show up the way that you expect them to. And the other benefit that it might give you is like if you have styles that you want to apply to something inside of an Angular context and outside of an Angular context, like that CSS, like you can use it there too.
Yeah. So because I had mentioned my old shop, we had some stuff that we had. So every engineer's running their own stuff pretty much. So we're all having to like put out our own web apps every now and then. We would have this like shared CSS file that we'd kind of pass around the group and be like, here you go. I need some styles. Just slap this on. It like, I don't know. I'm sorry. I totally interrupted your train of thought there.
No. So I actually think that's a good transition because I think, you know, not to shame you or anything, but like I think that is like one of the dangers of like having a global style sheet is that like oftentimes, like especially in like applications that get passed that, you know, are long lived and get passed from owner to owner and just generally don't have like somebody who is like very dedicated to maintaining that style sheet, like they can just become like very bloated. Like somebody doesn't know like where this class is applied somewhere in your application. Like you can do like a global search for a class name, but like what if somebody is like you know, dynamically adding that class name or like, you know, concatenating something so you don't see it. That's something that you might run into problems with. So like a lot of developers will just like leave it in there, and then that CSS just grows and grows and grows, and yeah, it just becomes this like big bloated asset that you have to load in every time to every application you have.
Performance, that kind of performance was not an issue to us. Like we dropped in 5,000 lines of CSS like it's nothing.
But there is a cost to also just like knowing what's in there. Like you might have to, like if you're looking at your application like using Chrome DevTools or something like that, like you can find the classes that are being applied. But I think that there is a potential for a lot of messiness, like when you have like a global style sheet that is like just forever growing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I definitely see that. So how would you, if you're coming greenfield into some project, how would you, what would you, like, what tools would you reach for off the shelf to kind of say, you know, this is how we're doing, what patterns, what tools?
So it depends on how much you like want to get out of the box. So if you're using something like Angular Material or like a Bootstrap-based component library or something like that, or like any number of like not Angular specific libraries such as Bulma or Semantic UI or something like that. I think Semantic UI, I'm not sure if you can, I think Semantic UI is agnostic, but if you're using something like that, like it's great to have like a base layer, like just kind of basically styling like list elements and, you know, like what font do you want to use or something like that. Like Angular Material, like lets you kind of like plug and play there, which is really great. But then like the other side of that is like, if you don't, if you want to like depart from a lot of those styles, then you're going to have basically like a layer that sits on top of it. And if you're departing really far from like the default styles, like you're again adding bloat, like you're basically like trying to overwrite and like playing this game of like just trying to like hack specificity in order to get your styles to show up over like Angular Materials or Bootstraps or whatever it may be. So like it's kind of like everything else, like it depends, right? I would say for somebody who's like just looking like out of the box, like doesn't have any like particular direction for like styling, and like is happy with like something that a pre-built library like Angular Material or Bootstrap provides. Like I would say just like go for like just using something like that, and then customize as you need to. But if you have like, say, a team of designers who's going to be like specifically outlining like how everything is going to look and function, and you think that you're going to be departing really far from that, like it makes sense to try and go more custom, and you like might want to like, I think the best approach, the best like middle of the ground approach is to have like a base layer at the bottom that's like styling all those basic elements, and then when you get into component
that's like
levels,
a global style sheet.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then if you're doing everything like custom, like you're not using like a component library, which usually like a component library would like provide a lot of those styles for you, then you like would just implement any components that you have, like any styles that you have at the component level for like things that you'll be reusing.
Yeah.
Well,
say you had like an organization-wide component library. Let's say we're like super cutting edge. We're using NX and all the cool stuff, and there's like this shared component library sitting out there. For let's say like, I don't know, a drop-down form or something like that. For something like that, would you expect just like the styles for that form to just specifically be in that one component's CSS file or SCSS file?
For the form, like the form component?
Yeah, for a drop-down component. Let's say we had a drop-down.
Yeah, you would either, so if that's like a style that should go for like all the inputs, like that would you would either make that global, or you would create a component that's like specifically like a custom drop-down component, and then store the file, the styles there.
Gotcha. Okay. So if there's things about it, like we want it to look similar to our input, like our text input, our dropdown wants to look similar to that. For something like that, are you thinking this would go down at some global style thing, or would this belong to like a lib scoped style? Are we just getting into weird weeds here?
You could add it to a library, but I think the more important thing to consider there is like is it going to be like, why are you adding it to a library? Like, are you separating it out because you're going to like change it out at some point? At that point, like it's total, like that's a totally valid approach. If you want to like change the form styles, or like have a feature have different styles than another feature. In that case, like you have to go with like feature level styling, which is not like something like in Angular specifically, like there's no specific like outline for feature level styling. What you have to do is just like lazy load it in with like your like a feature wrapper or something like that. You know? But I think that case is not, I think it's more common in like probably larger applications, like enterprise level applications. Like they're going to have like something that has its own brand or something like that. And yeah, in that case, usually what I do is like I have a wrapper component, and I just like pull those styles into that wrapper.
Gotcha.
And then you have to turn off view encapsulation.
Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. Yeah, it's interesting. When you mentioned Angular Material, I always thought that Angular Material had a lot of hooks in it. Like, if you go with Angular Material, it's really hard to get out of it. Like,
what do you mean? It has a lot of hooks in it.
It has a lot of hooks. It's hard if you make the decision to go with Angular Material. It's hard to back out from that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Like, I always thought like the way I would have assumed something like Angular material would be made is you'd have something like their CDK, and their CDK would just give you like the bones, the HTML for everything, and then the material would be a style sheet that you put on top of that.
But the CDK actually gives you the opposite, right? It gives you the bones in that it's giving you like the functionality, like the abstract functionality, and it doesn't like implement the template, and you kind of have to hook it up yourself, right?
Right. Well, there's different parts of the CDK. Like there's CDK tables, which I'm pretty familiar with. That'll actually it's a series of directives to let you like recreate tables, so that you're kind of you're building things vertically as opposed to horizontally, which is really nice. And really, all you need to do to go from a CDK table to a map table is you just like copy replace CDK with map inside of your template.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's easy. Yeah, because it's like the same underlying.
Yep. So the material table is built on top of the CDK table.
Yeah.
So and it's just kind of random that you can do that. I don't know if that's by design or not, but it's the way it works.
Yeah, so. I don't know if they explicitly like designed it for that, but I think that's like definitely intentional that they that like the all the functionality is like sort of abstracted out so that you can kind of like implement it your own way if you want to.
Yeah, but I would have loved to see the CDK go more down that route. I think like having inputs, input fields, for example. So not just inputs, but like the material. I think I'm saying this right. The input field will give you like the labels and like the animations that go with that, and the error handling and all that stuff. It would be really cool if like the CDK was that too. So it's almost like giving us a standard way of building our components. Like if you want to have a labeled input, this is the way to go. Here's this nice material style sheet you can use to make it look just like material. Or if you want to do your own thing, go nuts. So
yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. But I imagine building a tool set that is that flexible
I'm sure
takes a lot of thought. Especially when you don't like when you're like. I just imagine like kind of getting into a situation where you're like you have to make some assumptions about like the structure of it, the template, and if you're I imagine that's part of the difficulty, and then also like being able to properly apply, because like one of the biggest things that like a toolkit like Angular material gives you is like the accessibility is like something you don't have to worry about, right? And I think to some extent that's like used as a that's like something that people depend on enough that like I think that it's not difficult to get by as a programmer in a lot of environments without knowing anything about accessibility. So it's like deprioritized a lot. But it's something that like
it's
we
a
really
whole other dimension to this whole thing, right? Like, there's like the data side we were talking about, and then there's the UX side that we're talking about. But there's this next dimension of stuff too that's like having proper semantics and making sure like your bones are correct. So.
Yeah, and just also like you have to understand like how your application will be seen or experienced in a way that like you normally might not be familiar with, which is it's interesting. Like, but I imagine that would be something that would be difficult to sort of automatically apply in like a more abstract format that like the CDK provides. But it would be an interesting challenge.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's like
be interesting.
Yeah.
See. I think there's a lot of stuff baked into a lot of the material components where it absolutely needs more than HTML and CSS. Like you need JavaScript in there to make things work reasonably. So and you need that JavaScript to do material specific things too. Maybe that may be the main reason it's hard to do some of these things in kind of the way I'm describing. But I don't know. I'm guessing.
I'm guessing too. We're all guessing, really.
We're all guessing. There we go. Well, while we're guessing, let's turn our eyes to Tailwind, because I kind of promised we'd talk about that too.
Sure.
So Tailwind is no worries. Tailwind is, from what I understand, we had talked about this a while back too. I remember saying, this seems like what I always thought CSS would be before I started getting elbows deep into it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I remember having that conversation with you.
Yeah.
And I think it's like just generally like utility first approaches to CSS really, which Tailwind is, really appeal to a lot of people.
So let's maybe can we just talk about what the utility approach is?
Yeah, absolutely. So traditionally, or like the way that I learned styling applications was like you have a separation of concerns, right? Like you have your template, your HTML that defines the structure of like how your application and all the elements are going to fit together. And then you have CSS, which is going to style everything. And then you have JavaScript that is going to like make everything work together. It's going to provide the functionality. And a lot of people have been very like strict or like regimented about like separating those pieces. But like as what the web has like sort of evolved, like I think a lot of people have kind of turned away from that approach, because even though it seems like very well organized and like it makes a lot of sense, like there are some times when it doesn't make as much sense. And so like you might imagine like there's a lot of ease to adding one class to like your, let's go with like the text input that we were talking about before.
Yeah.
We have a text input. We have one class that we apply to it, or even like we don't even use the class. We just apply it to input type text. And that style is going to like apply to all my inputs throughout my application. And then design comes to me and says, well, actually, like this input has like a blue outline around it. We don't want that for like this particular type of input.
And then you tell them to deal with it.
It's not going to happen. Design has a very specific idea of like how they want this to look.
No. I understand it. That was all in jest, but
yeah. So you look at your application and you say, okay, well, the way things are configured right now, what I have to do, since I already have all these inputs, like I'm not going to add like another class, like so. I guess I'll like add this class to the special input that overwrites the blue outline that I had before. So now you have this like CSS that kind of like undoes your other CSS.
You know what I'm thinking about right now, Nicole? I'm thinking about braiding hair. Like,
yeah, exactly. It all comes back to the braid.
It all comes back to the braid. So for our listeners, we have this. Well, I gave a talk a couple of weeks back now, talking about complexity as like if you can imagine some strings, just a bunch of strings hanging down straight. It's very easy to tell what's going on there. Like maybe that's the starting point Nicole's describing here, where you say on this input or any input that's of type text, it's this. Like that's one string going down. But as soon as we say, well, for an input type that also has this class, you're braiding that a little bit. And you're going to keep braiding that until you're left with this mess that I wouldn't even know how to debug in CSS. I'd just be like, oh no, Google DevTools, help me out. What's happening? Yeah. Why is there a line through this thing?
And I've honestly like been like, I have looked through some styles like that. Honestly, like sometimes that I've written, and tried to understand.
We're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. Like we purposely braid that hair sometimes, and there's no need to. But
it kind of goes back to our conversation before about like the PR. Like when you look at PR, like you're just seeing like the product, but like when like the person who developed it like sees the history, right? It's like the same thing with like, this change to the styles, these input styles. So yeah, like you can imagine like maybe like 5 iterations down the line, you have these 5 different input styles. They're all overwriting each other. It's like just a mess.
Especially
and
if
like
you're not using like Angular and the encapsulation, the style encapsulation.
Sure.
This is all going in your global style sheet. This is all that.
Yeah. This is like partially assuming that at least some of these styles are global.
Yeah.
So at that point, you just have a mess, right? Like it's not like a thing that you recognize anymore, and the classes don't really like line up with like this like singular like clean hook to like the styles in the CSS. It's just a mess. And the approach that like utility first takes is it says, okay, like instead of trying to create this like hierarchical structure that we're going to have to like every 5 years go in and rip out and just like start over with. Instead of that, like let's just apply the styles in kind of like an immutable approach. So the way that we approach styles in utility first is we say, we have this input. I'm going to add a class for the blue border that I wanted. And I'm going to apply a class for like, like a red border when it's got an error or something like that. And you have like just this series of utility classes that you apply directly into the HTML, which kind of goes against like our original like separation of concerns, in that like you're really defining the styles in the template. But what that buys you is the flexibility to change, like, when you have that input that comes along that needs a black border instead of a blue border, you can change it right there, and it's not going to affect anything else, and it's not confusing.
Well, and you're not twisting things. You're laying Lego blocks on top of each other. You're saying, give me the blue Lego block, the blue Lego block for the background. Give me the 5-pixel block for the rounded corners or something like that. I'm assuming that's a thing. I don't know.
You're being very explicit right there about how your application and your individual components should look and operate. So that's the
utility. That's the utility approach, right? Okay.
Yeah, utility first.
Is Tailwind then just a utility-based library? Are there others like it? Or?
Yeah, there's a ton, because utility first gained a lot of popularity. I think the first one, gosh, it's been a little while since I last looked at it, but I can't remember what the first one was called. But yeah, there's a ton of like utility first, or like there's other names for that approach, but I can't remember them. I should have brushed up before this, but yeah, like the approach like became really, really popular probably like 5 years ago or so, because of that like flexibility that it gives you. And I think it's like sort of more well known in like the React and other communities, partially because of the difficulty with like incorporating it into an Angular application. So like basically what you're doing.
Yeah, where's that difficulty coming from?
Yeah, so basically what you're doing when you like have a utility first approach is like you're defining like tons and tons and tons of classes, right? Like, because what you're doing is you're saying like, okay, like I'm going to define for my application like a border that has a small size, medium size, large size, and you're like going through and configuring all of those as classes, like very tiny classes.
Yeah.
That's going to add up to a really big global CSS file.
Gotcha.
Really, really big. So the really cool thing about Tailwind in particular, and a lot of like other utility first utility first libraries is that what they do with post CSS is like go through and like clean out all the stuff that you're not using, so that you're not just like adding a bunch of like unnecessary classes that you've defined and you're not using them at all.
Those 5,000, I remember going back to our older example, the 5,000 line CSS file we were passing around. Most of the time we were using like 2 things from there.
Like, exactly. Yeah. So you don't want to add all that bloat. Like it's better to just like be able to like pull all that stuff that you're not using out. So that's what a post processor like post CSS does.
So that's going to pull out anything you never use, right? Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. So the difficulty with doing that in an Angular application is that, in previous iterations of Angular, like we didn't have as much of a hook into like the Angular build. So Angular itself uses post CSS in order to like process like style assets. But we didn't have the ability to hook into that. And so we couldn't add like the Tailwind post processor piece. And
so you could use Tailwind, but you wouldn't be getting advantage of all these performance boosters it's put in. You're stuck with the 5,000. I bet theirs is much larger, but you're stuck with the massive global. Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
That's it makes it less appealing for sure. But you can totally like use Tailwind, like that half of it, without like stripping all that out. I just think it's a lot less performant. With like recent iterations of Angular, like we have custom builders, we have the ability to kind of hook into the build process and like use post CSS in the way that we want to for Tailwind. And I saw Minko posted, he retweeted like an article with somebody who was saying that they added Tailwind, or I think it was like a tutorial for like using Tailwind with Angular. And so I think like with that becoming a lot easier, people are going to start exploring Tailwind more, which is awesome because Tailwind is really, really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading up on that. Now that I understand what's going on.
Yeah, maybe you can use it for the application that you're working on.
I wanted to. That was one of my questions for you. I wanted to ask on stream is, should I use it? It sounds like
I think you should.
Yes.
I think you should. Yeah.
Awesome. So okay, so we can hook into the Angular build process to make sure we're only getting the styles we need. Is that like, say I'm lazy loading each of my modules in, each of my ng modules in? Is it doing that like in chunks? Like if I come into my homepage, I just get, maybe I'm just using a few things in there, but then when I go to this lazy loaded route, well, is it set? Can you set things up to that point where you're like, well, I need X, Y, and Z now, so let's go get those? Is that a thing?
Well, for Tailwind specifically, or for like just Angular in general?
Yeah, I was thinking for Tailwind.
For Tailwind, like you're not going to get like the lazy loading of like component level styles in Tailwind because it's like all of the utility classes are defined globally.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like Angular itself, I imagine that it builds it by chunk. I haven't actually like looked at the build process, but like I would imagine that it builds each piece by chunk. So it would compile the like style assets like individually for your lazy loaded component.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Sounds like we're building out about our social media platform with Tailwind.
Yeah, I would be interested to like I haven't really like I kind of like played around with like Tailwind in an Angular application before, but like I haven't like done like a full-fledged application with it. So I don't know if you want, like we can kind of do it. I can come on again.
Are you offering to pair program?
That would be fun.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
that would be amazing. I'd love to do that.
Cool.
Let's try to figure that out because I am in desperate need of styles.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Nicole.
Yeah.
We're
Way over
about
time?
up with our time. Are we over time?
Was it supposed to be half an hour, or was it supposed to be?
No. It was supposed to be
Okay.
3:30 to 4:30. So
Okay,
we're
cool.
just coming up on it now. I just wanted to make sure. Do you have anything else burning you want to get off your chest while we're live? Anything about styles we really need to know? What is the one piece of wisdom you can give us in the next minute that is going to change our life?
Styling applications?
Yes. Well, anything. You could. Let's not limit ourselves.
About anything. Oh no. I don't know if I'm ready to give any impromptu advice.
That's fine.
I guess my impromptu advice is like take care of yourself and be kind to yourself.
That's so important.
It's not very original, but
no,
but it's always applicable.
We need to hear that.
Yeah.
As developers, I think we're working with the machine so much. Sometimes we think we are that machine.
Yeah.
And we're not. We are. Yeah.
You are not the machine.
We are not the machine. You are better than the machine. You are greater than the machine. Brandon knows what we're talking about.
Thanks, Brandon.
So all y'all listeners, make sure you're taking care of yourself. You heard it from Nicole. It's can't let her down. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Nicole. We'll get you on sometime. I don't know. We'll chat offline and talk about we got Isaac oiling all the gears. We'll chat offline about getting you on stream. We'll do some pair programming somewhere down the line. That would be great. I'm working on some like components. I'm actually working on forms right now, but they're kind of like components. So we can maybe start with that and just kind of go with stuff. There's some interesting stuff I'd love to get in. I've used Cypress a lot.
Nice.
Using like some screenshots there. Like you can do the pixel comparisons. So we can like really nail these things down if we want to, I think.
Yeah.
So
very cool.
I'm super excited for that stuff. It's so nice, Nicole. When you don't have any, this is all self-contained. So there's no like cloud, no like weird databases. I don't know how it's going. It's all right there. And my end-to-end tests just like go and they just come back. And I don't have to do anything weird. And it's amazing. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me on. This was really fun.
Yeah, we'll need to do it again soon.
Definitely. Cool. Take care, Zach.
Yeah, thanks. Before we head off, we're actually having Lars on our stream next time. So going from this one to the next one, we're going to talk about reactive stuff. So we're just going to take a little a detour from styles for a little bit.
Nice. But, when is that tomorrow?
That's tomorrow. Yeah. I don't know. I want to. There's so much we could talk about too. I think we could do a whole episode on just reactivity and animations.
Yeah.
I think those things work so well together. But yeah, we've done about 3 false endings now, so I'll get to the real one. Thanks y'all for coming on. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow with Lars from In Depth. So
awesome. Thanks.
See y'all.